All right. What is going on, team? It is December 17th. We got Tribal Group Coaching Call live here. We got a good number of athletes on the call. So thank you guys for making space. I'm seeing Chris Boyce, Brandon, Goldstein, Grant, Mason. And what we're going to get into today are the key ideas were some of the key sessions ahead of Elephant Mountain and just reminding you guys of why we're doing certain things and maybe just giving you a chance to prioritize a few workouts. Also wanted to get into just some like beginner bike basics, almost a refresher for some folks, but also for some of the newer folks, a chance to, just kind of clarify how we are developing on the bike. But before we get into that, we got to highlight some run development here from Mason. So, Mason, I was thinking like, how do I share this lesson, right, from the coaching call that we had? I think it was 2 weeks ago, right, on the long run and all the things to improve off the long run. And I was like, I kind of want to wait to see how he can like improve off of that and build off of that. And without a doubt, you fucking executed that to a T this weekend. So I'm gonna start with the last long run, the one that we pried into. And we'll just sort of call out what was not working so well in that one. And that will tee us up to show what went really well on the one this past weekend. So before I get into this, do you have any immediate feedback on this run? This was back from the end of October. This was the one that we just pried into together.
I'm trying to remember. I guess so this was the first time I'd ever done this workout. I guess just context behind it, and the way I was looking at it or the way I ran this is like I basically did like a warm up, whatever the warm up was, like in this one loop around my neighborhood, and then did like out and backs for the mile, just for everyone to have context around this. But yeah, we can. Then I'll just jump in if there's anything if you have questions or things I can clarify.
Cool. So when I'm looking at a run like this is just a great opportunity for any athlete to see like what is kind of the focus when a long run is being reviewed or a pace changing run, really, because we have two things going on here. This is a long run, but more importantly, this is an interval run. And so the first thing that stuck out to me was like we've got basically gaps in the watch. There are watch pauses between nearly every interval set. So this run is 5 by 1 mile tempo repeats. So you're getting up to zone 3 for a mile. Then you're checking down and you're doing a recovery for a quarter mile. And you go through that 5 times. And so I was seeing like, all right, well, we've got a handful of stops here. And one of the number one ways that we can just improve on how we're handling training overall, we can get better fitness development, we can just get easier mindset development is intervals should be one continuous set, right? We really want to train the body to work up to whatever the intensity is that's prescribed into the interval hard effort. And then we want to sort of flow down and be able to recover at whatever the prescribed interval is. And so that was the first thing that really stuck out to me. And then as we were prying into it a little bit more, what we realized was that you were almost going a little bit too hard for these tempo segments. This first one starts out at 7:30, 7:45. These ones are all pretty much run at 7:45. And when we checked in back on your zones, I believe off of memory that your zone 3 was really like 8:45. Is that right?
Yeah, my zone three I think is like 9:10 to 8:30 or something like that. And that was the biggest thing. Like that's why I was making these stops because I wasn't looking at it like a zone. I just saw like RPE 8 and I'm like, okay, like let's see what this feels like. And then I tried to push it. And so I would stop to like blow my nose and grab a drink of water in between every. I think that first stop was like a piss or something. But the rest
Yeah.
of them were like, stop and grab water. And so it was great. Like, I mean, we'll talk about the run from the last weekend in a second, I'm sure, but that was a huge
Yep.
difference is like trying to put those together and actually like realizing I don't have to like be all out or like look at it. It just it was a different way to look at the intervals that I hadn't really been doing before because I hadn't been paying as much attention to like the different zone paces. It was kind of like all on feel. And when I do
Right.
that, I generally go too fast for anything that isn't zone two.
Right. And I mean, this is the beauty of endurance is like, dude, you did your first Ironman this year, you did your first 70.3, and there's still opportunity to like make the process way better and just continue to improve through all of this. So that was a huge value and a reason why we did the zone testing, right? Is like giving you more clarity on your zones. I will say one thing on the RPE stuff. So the reason that RPE is written in there is because that, to me, at least as I understand it, is the simplest way to prescribe the effort in Training Peaks as it will reflect on your Garmin watch. The other way to do it is with heart rate, I believe. And what I've seen with athletes is that if their heart rate is either inaccurate on their Garmin, or if maybe their heart rate is just kind of out of zone for whatever reason, the watch is kind of freaking out and giving you alarms the whole time that like you're out of zone. So it's simpler to just say RPE of 8 or whatever it is.
Yeah, and
RPE of 8 is kind of how I would describe a tempo. But there's opportunity for me to improve on how I can clarify that. Now that I'm saying it out loud, I wonder if there is chance to just prescribe it via pace because that would make it very obvious for you where you're supposed to be running. But anyway, the reflection there was like RPE 8, you just kind of went hard. And as it relates to your zones, that was like a minute per mile faster than you really should have, which then required you to need a break, right? That was kind of the whole thing going on.
yeah, and the one note on the training thing is honestly, it's like because I didn't really pay attention to what my zones were. Like if there was like like now that I have looked at the zones, I'm like, oh, this is what the RPA like should have been based on my pacing. But I was just kind of all going off feel, and I know we set the zones like God knows how far back, and then I think Training Peaks like updates them sometimes, doesn't it, based on your or do you
It
have to manually
depends on if
update?
it senses faster pacing, it can suggest to update your threshold, but
Okay, so yeah,
they
we set those like so far back that I just wasn't even looking at it when I was doing these, and that probably would have made a world of difference in my training if I was paying a lot closer attention to this. So that's it's more
right.
on like once I made that connection, the RPE like works now. When I see the RPE numbers, I know what they're like correlating to, and I can think about that better and like tie everything together.
You have a different frame on it. Beautiful. So, that was really like one part of this. The other thing I'll add in is we spoke about like, hey, if you do need to pause your watch because you got to take a piss, or if you got to take a dump, like, listen, you got to do what you got to do. But that should also be used as feedback. Like, we should learn from that. And listen, if you got to take a dump mid interval set, like that should make you reflect on what did I eat before this run? When did I eat? What did I have for dinner? If you got a pee mid interval set, like, did you just slam 32 ounces of water 20 minutes before walking out the door because you woke up at 6 a.m. and didn't drink anything for 2 hours? And then all of a sudden you're going out for a run and you're like, fuck, I haven't had anything to drink. Like, these are all ways to just like refine the process a little bit more. Um, the other thing I wanted to note here was the actual route that was chosen. So for you guys who are following along on the screen here, when Mason starts this thing out, he does this kind of big loop that he does for about the first 25 minutes. So at about the 25-minute mark, he sort of loops back around to where he started this. But then as these intervals were going, I mean, Mason explained that he sort of did mile out and backs. What I observe as a coach is that the guys who are doing lots of up and backs with lots of turnarounds, running in and out of cul-de-sacs, they are typically also the guys that are pausing their watch a lot and not totally executing these runs the way that we are hoping to. The guys who execute these runs well, they're typically just running out and about. Like, they just have a long route. They know a place near them that's like an open road or it's a rail trail or whatever it is, right? We want to be safe. We want to be avoiding cars. We want to avoid intersections, stoplights. Like, if we're doing intervals, again, we want this to be a continual effort. And if you are doing an out and back run, like, that's one thing. You run like, 3, 4, 5 miles out, you turn around, that's one thing. But the consistent up and back is is just kind of stressful, if you ask me. And as we were looking at Mason's overall um, effort on long run consistency, well, what really stuck out as we were reflecting is like a bunch of these long runs were then getting missed. Like we had 3 straight weeks where the long runs were missed. We had 1 week where it was really cut short, and that was all after. That was like the 4 or 5 weeks after this one specific run. So to me as a coach, I'm like seeing this run, and to me, I'm just like, this is looks super chaotic. And then all of a sudden, mentally, like as we're trying to get this stuff in every weekend, there's just like friction, right? Whereas if we are somebody who's operating with some of these finer points tuned in, we can allow the mind to just get into rhythm of like Saturday morning is my long run day, right? If that's what the structure is that you're on, you get up at 6 or 7, freaking bang this thing out in an hour and a half. You're home by 9, and you're done with your training by the day, right? That's like the dream scenario that we go to. Now, Mason, very coachable, receptive, took the feedback well. Let's check in on the progress in his most recent, we'll call it pace changing long run. So this run slightly different. We got 2 by 20 minute tempo run here, and Mason's watch is Mason's watch has some things going on. So the elevation is always jacked up, and the elevation says it's about 10,000 feet of gain, ten
Yeah,
thousand feet of loss. So we'll get
Garmin
that
says
out of here.
1,000. So I think need to get a new watch or get it serviced or something. Yeah, every run, no matter if it's flat, Garmin says like 120,000 feet of gain. It's hilarious.
Yeah. So is what it is. We'll clear that out of there. And right here we really just have beats per minute, RPMs, and then his pace minute per mile. So what I see here is the first, like, let's just go right through it. So first, let's look at the things that we saw in the previous run. There is one short little pause here that looks like it's during the recovery. Boom, not during the interval set. That's huge. We also see that the route, as you look at the map, his route is a long out and back. This is probably on like a river trail, it looks like, some rail trail of some sort.
Yeah, it's
So
a
better
river.
selection of route compared to like the neighborhood loops and up and backs, right?
Yeah, way better. And I realized I'm like I want to do some more stuff on gravel so I can save my legs and running on road all the time, which that was great.
Softer surface. There we go. So I don't always program this for guys just because of what they've got access to, but if we can do long stuff on softer surface, gravel or dirt roads, like that's great. So Mason does a really good job here, right? Exactly to the 10-minute mark, we've got this warm up. You can see him gradually coming into the warm up. Then we can see that he bumps up into this tempo zone, and look at the pacing. He's running at that 849, 851, like he's following his zone prescription to a T. Heart rate is at 175. That's great. It looks super steady. And then we see him come into the recovery. So then he's got what, 5 minute recovery here. Checks down to 10:15, 10:30 pacing for the recovery. Looks like a quick pause. Was that like a P or something like that, Mason?
Yeah,
Perfect. Did it in the recovery. That's fabulously executed. Then bumps back up, and he's back again running 854, 852, right? Heart rate is right back up in that low 170s. He's got 172 there. Heart rate on the recovery had dipped down to high 150s, 160 ish. So we see like a good 10, 12, 15 beat gap between the working set and the recovery set, back into the working set, and then cruises home to finish this thing out. Heart rate comes down. We can see it's even at 150 at times. Pace is down to 10-minute miles or so. So to me, this type of development on how to execute an interval run, also a long run, like just beautiful here. Mason, what is your reflection on just how this went?
I mean, it clearly went a lot better. Like it was the the last two runs, like I almost was like the pace. Honestly, the biggest change was the focus on the zones because
Nice.
that gave me a lot better just like frame to run in because I kept thinking like my tempo should be closer to that like 8 minute pace. And so I was the last because I did this same run I think the weekend before too, and it was about and it was a lot different because I think I did it in my neighborhood still. And like I was almost like struggling. It was I guess even with that I was struggling to stay at that 9 minute, and this like going on like a longer out and back made it a lot easier to think about like staying at that tempo pace, and like setting up a route setting up a route beforehand like this made it a lot easier to execute the run. Um,
Love it.
yeah.
What real quick, what are these? So these dips here where like it looks like you stop for a second. Like what are these?
Um, I those are me like trying to shoot snot out of my nose because every time I'm trying to run and I do it, I'm just like I start to like I'm not coordinated, man. Like I am so I'm just stop. It's a lot easier to me to clear my nose when I like fully stop for a second. And so like, maybe like uh but yeah, that's what that is.
Okay, good. So whatever, right? Still some
Yeah.
opportunity to sort of sort that out, but that's
Yeah.
fine, right? Like massive progress from here. One thing, so now I want to be able to connect this to race day, right? And I want to help you guys understand like Mason's having a massive evolution in real time on executing zone training. And now how can we think about that for a race? Well, for an experienced athlete, a 70.3, we really want that to be like a zone three kind of an effort. And listen, if your body is not there aerobically where you can sustain that, that's okay, right? We still just opportunity to develop. But what I'm hearing from you, Mason, is that your initial expectation was that you should be able to run 8 minute pace for what you would just consider as tempo. But if I had asked you if you can run 8 minute pace for a 70.3, I would assume the answer would be fuck no.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it would be like I don't know if there's like some openings this summer to possibly do a 70.3, but like the goal would be to run like this, like just sub 2 hours, like sub 907 or whatever that is.
Right.
Right. Which
And
I guess
so
is my zone three. Yeah.
that's right into the zone profile. So right here in this run, like you just banged out 40 total minutes at around 8:45 pace, right? Which is super different than the effort level you're putting out when you're running the 10 minute pace, right? And you're recovering or cooling down. But it's also super different than the 8 minute pace. Like the 8 minute pace for you is up in your threshold.
Yeah.
And so as we develop fitness, right, just prescription to these zones and execution on these, I mean, this was one of the big early reasons why I wanted to do the training was that I was seeing that guys were just going too hard. And it's like, listen, we don't need to go that hard in these certain zone profiles. We can still get the stimulus and get the adaptations we can need. We can actually get them better. And we can start to develop some pacing that's actually sustainable because there's really no point to be running 8 minute pace for the first 20 minute set if you can't run it again for the next 20 minute set.
Can I add another note here too? Something I just remembered. I was listening to the symposium call, I think, when I was doing this run, and I messaged Blaine privately after, but he was talking about how like it's almost better. He was talking about something about the difference in like recovery of like walking versus just like jogging really slowly. And I thought about that a lot. Like I wanted to walk for like the first like minute or so after I finished these intervals because it was like cold as hell, and I was like, I just need a second. But I was like, okay, if I can just like jog really slowly, like it made me realize that it's not as hard as I thought it would be to maintain that like 10-minute recovery pace. And the biggest difference between this run and some of the last long runs that I've done is that I've felt like that 10-minute pace has been significantly easier to hold recently.
Recently, well, this is awesome because what I'm seeing going on is like number one, you're not having to work quite as hard as you think in the on segments, right? So that 8:45, it's not crushing your body the way that the 7:45 was in that 5x1 that we looked at. But part of endurance development is that, that easier pace, it might not just automatically get faster at like this up and to the right trajectory. It might stay the same, but just get way fucking easier. Just get way easier. You might just see your heart rate stabilize more at it, right? You might see your heart rate actually start to drop, right? We might see from you in a couple of months of development that like we're able to see, consistent 140s running, right? You're in 150s here, which is fine, right? We're in 140s in the beginning, starts out 130 and does a good job through the first couple of minutes of sitting there in the 145 range, but then it gets up into the 150s, right? So that to me would be like how I'd orient you to think about this type of stuff moving forward is like, how can I keep recovering really well in that 10-minute pace and make that thing feel fucking easy?
Yeah, and I think about what you said about just like preparing for race day, and I've seen so many people talking about it of like running like hot summer miles or like running cold miles. Like once I get to the race day when it's well, it's going to be I guess my half marathon's in May, so it might still be hot, but it's going to be a hell of a lot more advantageous running environment than what I'm running in here. And so like that built the compounding of just the training and the better environment, like my heart rate will end up being lower and it'll be easier to sustain some of those paces is what
Right.
I'm imagining.
Right. And just with more execution on runs like this, you will also get more feedback of like, well, was my heart rate higher this week at the same pace? Well, was I dehydrated? Did I have a fuck ton of caffeine? Was it really windy? Like all these different elements that um that impact heart rate, you'll just organically start to be a little bit more aware of rather than just think like my heart rate's too high and it just should be lower. All right, cool. Well, thanks for letting me pry into that, Mason. This is just such a great example. So I'm going to probably clip that and just share that with the group. Okay. The next thing that I wanted to get into was maybe I'll check into Brandon's plan here. So we are coming up on Elephant Mountain pretty soon. And I am starting to scale some guys on time on feet. So we got some 2 hour, some 3 hour runs going on, some trail time. We're doing some run walks. But I wanted to highlight three specific training days. And these aren't like a specific day for the whole group, but just like three sessions that we can think about for developing towards Elephant Mountain. So, number one is the implementation of this workout called Green Zone Uphills. So this is something that I've been experimenting with a little bit recently, and it's really fun to execute on for the guys that have good mountain access near them. So the idea of these is that we are basically doing anywhere from like 10 to 20-minute segments of continuous running uphill. A lot of times in ultra training, what we're doing is like running the flats and descents and hiking up the inclines. But to me, this is giving us a little bit of a better fitness development aerobically. It's getting us up, into that zone two for sure. Like the idea is that we're staying in zone two this whole time. Green zone really to me means like zones one and zone two. So if you are getting into your zone three, the idea would be like then you would start hiking to bring your heart rate down. And you want like a managed zone two, high zone two effort going uphill, right? Working against gravity. This is also bringing in some strength stimulus that will certainly be needed in Elephant Mountain. And to me, this is just a session that I'm starting to give to a few guys, especially the guys that I know have good trail access and mountain access. And this is also a really good test of fitness. Like if you are not able to run uphill, significant grade while staying in a zone two, I want you to be experimenting with like how you can make your body work less at the same work rate. Like, can you shorten your strides? Can you put out less power with each stride? Like, what can you adjust within your effort to allow your body to work less while still moving you up the fucking mountain? Like, that's kind of the idea. Um, and if you just aren't able to stay in your zone two at all and you're automatically going up into zone three, that's just a big sign that we just need more aerobic development. It's not like anything super bad. There are some guys with, they just don't have the experience that some other guys on the squad have. And so they're probably not going to be able to do green zone uphills. They're probably not going to be able to run up a mountain and staying in zone two, right? And that's fine. But we also want to use that as a signal to then prioritize other parts of the training process that can help us develop there. And to me, that is the highlight of the bike rides that are still on guys' plans. So, Brandon, great job this week. We're in the middle of a fast, and he's still got the 45-minute recovery ride in yesterday. These one, two, or three touches on the bike, depending on, who you are and what you're building towards year over year, right? Some guys have one ride on the plan, some guys have a couple more. We don't want to be skipping these. Even getting 30 minutes in is very, very valuable. I was talking to an athlete yesterday, and there's a 45-minute run on his plan. And he told me that the covers were calling. So I'm like, all right, he stayed in bed. And what happened next? And then he tells me that he didn't have time for the ride. But then he tells me that he did something else, non-exercise related, for 35 minutes. And what the athlete did that was non-exercise related was still valuable, still development in other areas of life, right? So it's not the end of the world. But the idea of not putting up a zero on these bike rides is something that should be top of mind for everybody. Just because you cannot get the 45 minutes that's on the plan or the hour that's on the plan does not mean that 30 minutes isn't still valuable. It's still giving you aerobic base work. It's still flushing the legs out. It's still giving you like the neuromuscular bike touch. And if you're somebody who's got a 70.3 or an Ironman coming up later this year, like, we don't want to let the bike just be totally forgotten, right? We want to evolve out of the idea of, oh, I'm doing an ultra marathon next, so I'm only running in this season of training. Oh, I'm doing a 70.3 next, so I'm like, now I need to start swimming and biking. It's like, no, if you're doing a 70.3 at any point in this year, or an Ironman at any point in this year, we should be doing free sport training year round. Now, building off of that, so I said I'm going to mention 3 sessions, but I'm actually going to mention 4. So I am intentionally including bricks still in guys' plans, especially somebody like Brandon. Like, Brandon does great on the bike. Brandon's been developing like crazy on the bike over the past couple of years. So I want to keep giving him these touches. And to me, this is also a little durability boost on his run volume. So this week for Brandon, he's got 4 runs, right? We're finishing up this fast. So he's got an easy recovery run today. We got hill repeats coming up on Friday. Good strength stimulus, good threshold stimulus. Going to get into an endurance ride. We got a double day. So endurance ride right into a brick. And there's some pace changing in the brick. Some of the same things that were mentioned in Mason's tempo effort on that run are applicable there. A little bit of strength work, putting out zone 3 power, zone 3 pace, a little bit of work on heart rate control, bouncing between zone 3 and zone 2. And then to finish Brandon's week out, he's got the green zone uphills. So these green zone uphills, these are going to be at the end of, a 7+ hour training week. They're going to be on the back end of 3 days of running. And I'm sure somewhere sprinkled in here is going to be the strength plan that we're working on for the Elephant Squad. And this to me is just part of framing out the build towards Elephant, and just a good example here of a week and how we're building up. The next thing I want to touch into is double run day. So I've got this loaded in on Monday for Brandon, but that was just really a placeholder for wanting to have it in this week. Let me just move that just for visibility purposes here. Next thing that I want to get Brandon into is a double run day. So this double run day, very similar to the brick. This is just a unique way to get run durability built up. 45 minutes in the morning with some uphill strides. Uphill strides are kind of like a bridge between standard strides on flat road and then hill repeats. 45 minutes of that in the morning, mostly endurance with a few of those uphill strides, and then adding in 40 minutes in the evening. So, we've got some fatigued legs, second effort of the day. It's going to be going out and run 4 or 5 miles. And so as we are thinking about all of this, right, what are the themes that we're talking about here? I just shared a podcast on, run training in Ironman, and basically said that the keys are aerobic development, durability, and then fuel plan. And those 3 things are really true across any type of endurance race. They're just done a little differently for each race. So as we're working towards Elephant here, well, aerobic development, right? We're getting that. We got a bunch of good rides this week. We got easy runs. He's still swimming. Green zone uphills. That's aerobic development. Run durability. So what's going on with run durability on the plan right here? We got hill repeats. That's a strength run. We got a run off the bike. Going to be running on some fatigued legs. We got long run, 2 hours on trails, running up mountains, right? Big time durability builds. And then when we think about this, right, if we can think about this beyond just like what's this singular week, well, next week we're going to get into some double runs. So that's another touch on durability. And overall, just wanted to share some of that vision so that you guys can understand, like, hey, what's kind of going on with the plan? Why are these training sessions here? How do I want to think about them? How can I execute on them? And Brandon's doing a really good job of building up here. Um, Anybody on the line have questions related to any of that stuff that was just shared on the Elephant Mountain build?
I got a quick question, Ryan.
Yeah.
When would you mix in like a treadmill, just considering time of year, weather, snow, conditions, right? Like obviously you could get out there and push through those conditions. That's going to be beneficial just in terms of like mental toughness and durability. But are there times where I want to like focus and be like, okay, this is a quick run or a tempo run. I would probably get more out of this if I just went to the gym and hopped on the treadmill versus getting out trying to like push through snow and bad conditions.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Great question. We're having a few guys on the squad, talk more openly about treadmills, which is great. I would say that today's effort, right, easy recovery run. It's 25 minutes of not thinking about anything and just running really easy. That's fine to be on a treadmill. I would say also the hill repeats. Like the idea of hill repeats is we want some top end threshold stimulus. We also want to get some force production and some power output. And we also want to work on form, right? Hill repeats are a great way to ingrain proper mechanics. And so if that could be done on a treadmill, somebody had asked me this past week what kind of grade on treadmill, like 6 or so. Like it doesn't have to be something heroic. 6 or 7 is like totally fine. Just enough to basically like change your gait and make you work a little harder. That's kind of the idea. If you are doing I would assume your bike is on the trainer right now, and it sounds like the treadmill you've got access to is at the gym. So I'd probably say that pace change run off the bike is probably one that's just fine to do outside, right? So you can just do that immediately off the bike. And then the idea of the green zone uphills. So, I mean, you have mountain access. If you're covered in snow, maybe we can talk about that in a second. But even the green zone uphills workout, like I just gave that to Blaine, and Blaine lives in Florida. There's no such thing as an uphill. So I said, do you have a chance to do this on a treadmill? Like throw this on, 6 or 7, or that might even be better as like an 8 or a 9% grade because we really want you like going up, and like we want to bridge on that workout the idea of like you're just slow and sloppy trotting. Like we don't want the trotting to be slow and sloppy, but there is opportunity to be like short and choppy with strides and a little bit more on the balls of our feet and like finding that rhythm that's moving us forward, but we're going uphill, so we don't really care about pace, right? Those are kind of my ideas. Do you have any questions off of that?
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think having a good mix of the two is better than just saying like, no, I'm just going to run outside all winter, um, and go slow and dredge through snow. Right, I did that last year and was like pushing through like 6, 7 inches of snow, just thinking like, oh, I'm building mental toughness, but I was not going fast. I did not have good form. I mean, yeah, it was just kind of garbage.
Yeah. So like, listen, if you're out like that, right, that would be an opportunity to like completely change the intention of the workout. That is basically just time out in the mountains, just kind of grinding. That's fine, right? But that's a totally different intention than what we're talking about here.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So I'm gonna wrap up on the plan shares here, and I'll just talk a little bit about cycling development. So there were a couple of questions that I got over the past week or two from newer athletes on RPMs and basically what we want to be thinking about on the bike. So the whole idea of cycling development is generating rhythm on the bike. We want our effort on the bike to be a continuous motion where we are basically one with the bike and we are fluid, we are smooth, and we are really efficiently generating power through momentum. Rhythm is the word that I just keep coming back to. When we're out there 2 hours, 3 hours, like this is not supposed to be a start and stop effort, right? Similar to Mason's interval run. Like there are times it's fine to stop and pause the bike. You got to pee. You want to stop and hit a coffee shop. Like that's all good. But when we are riding, we need to develop some type of flow between our power output, our muscular endurance, our breathing rate, our body position, how relaxed we are. Like we need to be relaxed with this process. And so the idea of developing rhythm, it's very important to be cognizant of RPMs and cadence use through bike development. So what I typically see, right, a lot of guys come into the squad and they've been in like a strength training background, or their only experience riding bikes is that they've been on like flat pedal bikes with sneakers. Either of those athlete profiles, right? Either somebody who is like squatted 4 or 5, 600 pounds, or somebody who's just ridden beach cruisers their whole life. What I typically see is that they default to a very low cadence of, we'll call it like 60 RPM to 70 RPM. And the general frame I want you to think about is like 60 to 100 is like kind of how I categorize cadence. We do stuff lower than 60 sometimes, and we do drills that push us higher than 100. But like just for your general frame, 60 to 70 is a very low cadence, and 90 to 100 is a very high cadence. What I see from the guys who are from more of a strength background, or they have only ridden flat pedal bikes, is that they are very quad dominant and they're really just slow and heavy on the pedals. And that isn't necessarily bad, but that opens up an opportunity to develop where we can expand our comfortable cadence range from that 60 to 70 range, then up to riding comfortably at 100 RPMs, where our legs are turning over much more rapidly. Now, what's going on when the legs turn over more rapidly? Well, this is where single leg drills come in. So single leg drills are one of the foundational drills that we use. I'll mention the other drill in a second, spin ups. But single leg drills, very easy. You unclip with your left leg and you spin for 30 seconds, only right leg. Then you swap. You do 30 seconds, only left leg. Then you clip both in and you do 30 seconds together. And the idea is that when you are spinning with just one leg, you will be listening for clicks that are indications that you have lost tension on the chain. And I see this all the time on guys from around the 9 or 10 o'clock position up to the 1 o'clock position in the pedal stroke. They push with the quad on the front end, right? If you're wearing sneakers on flat pedal bikes, you can only push on the front end. And then they lose connection on the back end. And that is just complete loss of power. You're not actually moving the bike forward at all in that moment. It's basically a huge gap in efficiency. But then what I typically see is that guys all of a sudden are like, well, I'm clipped in. Now I can start like yanking up with my hamstrings and really applying a ton of force on the back end of the pedal stroke. And what we ultimately want to evolve to is a continuous amount of pressure through the whole pedal stroke. There really shouldn't be like an extreme amount of force on the front end or an extreme amount of force pulling up on the back end from the hamstring. It should be very well connected the whole time. And this is the value of single leg drills, is that they expose where you are losing tension. And you will notice if you have a gap from 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock or whatever it is in that range, all of a sudden you're then pushing really fucking hard on the front end with your quad when you get back to that position of power. Now let's connect this back to rhythm. The idea of rhythm and the idea of being one with the bike and connected to the whole thing is that we have that continuous motion that also allows for very evenly distributed muscle output. So we've got quad output, but we've also got hamstrings engaged, and now we're getting the glutes engaged even more as there's this distribution amongst these larger muscles and, of course, all the smaller muscle groups that are at play, you know, dispersed in between all those. Now back to the cadence idea. So when somebody comes in and they're at 60 or 70 cadence, what I want to do is I want to help them raise their comfortable cadence up to 100 or even higher. And that to me is all about neuromuscular training on the bike and training the legs to be connected to the bike the whole time, clipped into the pedals, connected to the chain the whole time. And it's also going to be eliminating those gaps in the pedal stroke. And this is where we use spin-ups. So spin-ups are the next drill that we use. And it's basically these like 30-second repetitions where you are just blasting your cadence to as high as possible. Like when I do spin-ups, I get up to like 130. Like my legs are ferociously turning over. And you want to stress the system on like, what can I get to where I'm not like bouncing out of the seat? And you're going to need to keep consistent connection to the pedal, to the chain the whole time in order to do that. If you're losing tension on the chain, you're going to be bouncing all over the place. So a lot of times, right, we will see guys that start low with the cadence, and I'm trying to raise them higher. But there's also opportunity to develop with low cadence as well. So this is kind of just getting into like the broader, maybe next phase of development. Using low cadence, this is allowing us to develop more muscular endurance. It's more slow twitch fibers. And then the higher cadence, up 90, 100 plus, that is leveraging more of the cardiovascular system. Your breathing rate's going to be a little higher because you're turning over super quickly. And that's not going to be as stressful on your muscles. So if you are riding and you want to play with this stuff, if you're riding and your trainer's telling you you're putting out 200 watts, play around with what it feels like at 60 cadence versus 100 cadence. Like you're going to feel a difference. And we want to continue to expand that range that we're comfortable to ride at while also working to understand our individual most efficient cadence. So a good data point that all of you guys can look back to, those of you who have done a bike test recently, we had a good portion of the team do a bike test. Check out what your cadence went to in that bike test. Check the whole 30-minute segment or maybe even the final 10 or 20 minutes. That will show you where did your body naturally gravitate to when it was needing to put out its most efficient maximal power. For me, that's like around 85, which is a good indication of where I can ride in races. Now, I've played around with a lot of different cadence in races. I've raced at under 80 and I've raced at like 97. And there's just feel that you can develop, right, across a broad range. But I will say that what we want to continue to push is that top end cadence that we are comfortable to ride at. If you can ride comfortably and put out power at 100 RPM, that is a very strong indication that your body neuromuscularly is learning how to ride a fucking bike. If you are only riding at 60 or 70, like you might develop and you might put out power, but that also might be a little bit of a limiting factor that's kind of disguising the fact that your technique can improve a ton. Now, what's another element that we're adding into this? Heart rate observation. So very often when guys will come in, we'll do tests on the bike and the run, and their bike heart rate will be lower than their run heart rate. Very common to see 10 beats lower on the bike, right? And there are even times that we build the zone profiles completely differently. And what that is truthfully a sign of is that your body just isn't trained neuromuscularly to tap into your full energy output on the bike. If you can run at 185 beats per minute, like if that's your threshold from your threshold test, but if your bike heart rate is only at 175 in the threshold test, like doesn't mean that your body can't work harder on the bike. It doesn't mean that you're incapable of getting higher up there. It just means that the way that you are physically trained neuromuscularly with your technique, there's a limiter there at some point. And all this cadence work that we're talking about, these drills, low cadence sets, right? We do low cadence sets, sub 60 for like 8 minutes, then up to over 90 for 2, back and forth on the 3-phase endurance ride. These are all things that are going on. All of that connecting back to the idea of rhythm. If you're riding super heavy at 60 or 70 and you're not really feeling like you're in rhythm, you're like grinding your ass off, like play around at 70 or play around at 90, excuse me. Play around at 90 and see how that feels. If you're in an endurance ride or if you're in, I would say even really any kind of ride where you're in a certain set where you're working to hold a certain number of watts and you're feeling your legs fatigue, I would challenge you. Can you change gears to get into a higher cadence, and can you make those watts feel easier? Because like I said, we can be doing 90 or we can be doing 200 watts and we can be at 60 RPMs, and that could feel totally different than doing 200 watts at 90 RPM. So that is just some beginner and foundational, and it is beginner, but like these are things to continually work on and check on. And as we are, the reason that I wanted to bring this up is because there are some guys that asked about it, but also connecting it back to the Elephant Mountain stuff, like we can bring intention into these rides. Like we can bring intention into, you know, even a recovery ride, like staying fluid on the chain the whole time. Like that's really helping you out. That's really helping you develop, right? It doesn't need to just be like this, like slow and sloppy right? Just like kind of sitting there, just doodling around on the bike. So that's what I got to share on bike development. Does anybody on the line have questions on that? All right, no questions. Cool.
Oh,
That is what I got for you guys today. I will open the floor for just general questions if anybody wants to talk on some things on their plan or just training questions in general.
I was a little slow unmuting there. I was kind of had a question. Isn't like Lionel um S- Sanders, that's his name, right? Am I getting that right? Lionel Sanders.
Yep.
Is he considered like a grinder type rider where he naturally has a lower cadence?
Yes. So that would be a good example. So Lionel Sanders, I think he rides at 75. He rides at
Yeah,
75 cadence in races. He's one of the best in the world.
right.
Jan Frodeno just retired, but basically the best Ironman athlete over the last decade. He races at 92. So there's a different number for everybody. It's going to depend a little bit on your physiology, your musculature makeup. Probably going to depend on your aerobic like base, like how strong is your foundation. Um,
Is there
so
like
this
a
is why it's like
slump?
important. Like when I give guys like these cadence rides, or even just like I want to empower you guys. Like I like to include those because they're structured for development. But like I also want you to be feeling things out on a standard endurance ride where I don't really give you a ton of direction and more just say like go enjoy yourself and fuck around on the bike and figure out how to get better and have fun.
I like it. I imagine like somebody if they're slow twitch or fast hit twitch muscle fiber type, like that would probably play a difference into what their strength would be.
Yeah. And we also got to think, so that's also related to like body comp. So you think about somebody like Adam Sikora, right? So Adam Sikora is training for Chattanooga 70.3. Adam Sikora just benched 500 pounds. I don't know how much he can squat, probably 700. That dude's legs are fucking huge. That dude's legs weigh a lot more than my legs. And so for him to throw those over at fucking 95 RPM, that's a shit ton of work. And so Adam is very likely most efficient at like a 70 to 75 or 80, something like that. But if he's only riding at 70 to 80, what I can guarantee is happening is that his pedal stroke's getting sloppy. He's wasting energy at some point in the pedal stroke. And the way that I described it in a video yesterday is like if you have those gaps, the bike is almost like moving forward and then stalling. Like really, if you were like to super slow it down. And so part of Adam's training is like Adam will have sets up at 95. They'll be short little 2-minute sets, but it's because we want to get the neuromuscular stimulus. But then we got to recognize his body comp, and these are just sort of like assumptions from me. I'd have to see from a bike test of like what he gravitates to, what feels best from him, but like that's super likely what's going on.
Nice.
Cool. All right. Well, that is what I got for you guys. We got a couple of things in the chat. Okay, I missed out on these. These were a little while ago, though. It looks like. Okay, just treadmill comments and stuff like that. Um, Dan, appreciate it. Dan on the line, learning a ton. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for being here. I will get this uploaded for the folks who were not present, and I will see you guys in the chat as we keep rolling on with this fast. Let's maybe a little fast check. Brandon, how far in are you?
I'm probably about 40 hours right now.
40 hours. Love
Yeah.
it. Chris Boyce,
About 40. Same as Brandon.
40.
Yeah.
Jake, did you step up to the challenge? I don't know that I've seen your name thrown around with the updates.
No, my big challenge this week is getting in the pool today. I'm
Getting in the pool. Love it.
I'm that's gonna be my focus because I'm not excited for that one.
Okay.
So-
Okay. Respect for knowing what you need to face.
Yeah.
Grant, are you able to check in here?
Yeah, no, on just got hour 48 done.
Hour 48. Love it.
Yep.
You're doing well.
Well, yeah, besides the massive hunger pains, not complaining, really, really, really good so far.
Stefanos, what hour are you at?
44.
44. You and me both. I'm at 44:53. I just loaded my app up. Yeah, Yeah, it's
About 45.
yeah, there you go. Nice. Cool. Well, really glad so many folks are taking this on, and we will keep the updates coming, and I will see you guys in the chat. Adios.